All right. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Hello. Thank you so much for your patience. My name is Stacy Cruz, and I am the Strategic Programs Manager for Fear Free, and I will be your webinar host this evening. Thank you all for joining us for Speak the Right Words, brought to you by Vetaquinol. Presenting today will be Debra Vey Voda-Hamilton, Principal at Hamilton Law and Mediation, the first conflict consultation practice in the U.S. dedicated to helping people resolve conflicts that arise in business and life over animals. Debra is a sought-after speaker at national and international veterinary and veterinary management conferences, as well as online webinars for her programs, Stop License Review, Nipped in the Bud, Not in the Butt, and enhancing communication skills during COVID. She skillfully addresses the needs of the veterinarian when difficult issues arise in their practice and how to help staff and pet owners address the conflict proactively. She also helps pet owners and pet service providers aid each other in the creation and implementation of simple, short, and long-term pet care plans. The MAAP plan enables beloved companion animals to get the care that their owners want them to have at any time their owner is personally not able to care for them. Debra is the past president of the AVMLA, is a consistent VMX moderator, a member of Vet Partner, and sits on the ethics committee. She belongs to the Society of Veterinary Medical Ethics and is a legal consultant to NOVV and AVDT. We are so excited to have her with us this evening, and I know everybody is going to enjoy this presentation. Just some quick housekeeping before we begin. There should be quite a few options on your Zoom control panel. There is a chat feature, which is an open chat forum for our audience tonight, but there is also a different Q&A feature. We are going to have time at the end of the presentation tonight to address questions from the audience. So if you have a question that you'd like Debra to respond to, please be sure to use the Q&A box so I can keep track and don't lose it in the open audience chat. We're so excited to have Debra with us here today. So on that note, I will pass it over to you and we will go ahead and get started.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to put this program on for everyone because I know that, quite frankly, it's been a rough few months for everyone in the vet industry, given what we've been doing and dealing with COVID. So I'm trying to get rid of the questions, Stacy, because I wanted to read what the question was, and it doesn't seem to be disappearing. It's in the middle of my sheet, but
I will get rid of it on my end, but no worries. I will take care of all the questions.
I'm so glad everyone is here today. I know it's been a rough 11 months, and I think this program is going to help you in such a big way recognize what you're bringing to a discussion and what others are bringing to a discussion. Conscious conversation skills are really necessary for speaking the right words. We don't always pay attention to what we're saying, and that sometimes can get us into trouble. So without further ado, I am going to try one more time to get rid of this Q&A so that it can go away, and it won't, and it just is going to be there forever in the middle of my screen, which is not good. Let me see. There it goes. Yay. Okay, here we go. So let's look at how you address conflict when it arises. Now, this is an individual task. Please take it and really listen to hear what I'm asking you to do. This program is going to seek to help you recognize your response to conflict, not how to respond to someone else's response to conflict, because quite frankly, the only one you can control is yourself. So if we decide to take a minute, take a deep breath while we're here and say, okay, I'm just going to really look at how I respond. It's going to give you so much of a bigger benefit from this program than thinking about how you can apply it to others. It goes on to provide you with easy to implement tools. I was telling Stacy before we got on that the 3 words that I'm going to give you are sometimes printed and put up in every veterinarian's patient room so that everyone can remember to do it when things get rough. It helps you navigate that difficult conversation. What I like to do, and the book I wrote was Nipped in the Bud, Not in the Butt. I'd like you to be able to have the skills to shut down difficulties before they get out of control. So today's learning objective, if you're a pet owner or a service provider, speaking the right words has to be fostered by a mindful reaction to difficult discussions, which means you really have to understand what's going on with you when someone is saying something. It's going to help you gain new skills to peacefully and proactively address disagreements. You need to be able to choose whether or not the relationship goes forward or let it go peacefully. I want you to understand that this program is going to help you appreciate how you think, what you're bringing to the table, as well as appreciating how others think, which may not actually be how you think they think. It's interesting that our perspectives on how other people think isn't necessarily correct. I know you find that hard to believe, but really it's true. I want to teach you how to enhance your listening skills. And I want you to find the strength to allow yourself to ask curious questions and discussions without presuming, as I said when I was a litigator, evidence, not information, not in evidence. Because really, we go to a certain point and we think we know what's going on, and we can really be completely wrong. And if we stop and ask some curious questions and have some discussion, it can often stop the downward spiral of a conversation. And at the end, I hope everyone will leave here realizing they have the skills that they can navigate a difficult conversation. So before we start, do me a favor, and Stacy, they can put it in the chat box or they can put it in wherever, or we can just go through it because I don't want to waste too much time on this. But I'd really like to have everyone take a piece of paper or use the question and answer chat box and write down, how do you respond to conflict? A, fearfully, B, curiously, C, reactively, or D, defensively. The second question would be, how do you feel when involved in a disagreement? Do you feel nervous? Are you interested? Are you helpless or feel helpless, or do you feel bullied? The third one is, do you have a go-to phrase to help speak the right words when conflicts arise? Do you or you practice? Yes or no? Would an easy to adopt conversation skill help your business or your discussions with, really family members, clients, staff members, whomever? And what do you hope to get out of this program? So it's tools to help you in conflict, mindset to help you in conflict, info to help you in conflict, all of the above, none of the above. So Stacy, if anybody's putting anything in, let me know and we'll talk about it. But if no one's put anything in, I will move on, because usually most of the answers come as fearful or defensive, nervous or bullied. Yes, as always, you want to learn how to do this. Would you like to adopt the skill? That would be yes. And then the tools are all of the above. So
Looks like we're getting some mixed responses. Some are saying that the choices aren't mutually exclusive and we can feel all of those things at different times.
Absolutely. And you can circle all of those things at those times too. Absolutely. So thank you. So where do conflicts arise and words matter? Every interaction we have, even in the best of interactions with our family, our friends, our clients, our staff, and strangers, the words we use can often rise to conflict, which is really interesting because you might not ever intend it. How many of you out there, and raise your hand, have said something and someone took it totally incorrectly, and you're like, how could you get that out of that? And it turns out that they just heard your words in a way that impacted them, as opposed to listening to what you were saying or asking you for clarity. So conflicts can arise with any words you use, even really great words. Conflicts occur because people perceive information differently. This is especially true in the animal world. I mean, here we all are working with fear-free. We know how people interpret the term fear-free. They interpret it differently. There are different ways. We teach a certain method and path toward getting a fear-free certification, yet having that information sometimes is different than what I perceive as being fear-free or what someone else would. So people perceive information differently. That perception often is not understood or recognized or respected by an individual as someone's bias or perspective or perception, or my own bias or perspective and perception. I want you to hold on to the fact that a lot of this has to do with how we receive information. So remember, sometimes it's the 20 years we've had on the job, we know who this person is, and that's our bias, our perspective, or our perception that sometimes creates the perfect storm to become a conflict. Failure to be aware of life experiences, yours and the other person's, can often escalate into a conflict, and you scratch your head and go, how did that happen? I had a new vet at Cornell when I gave a talk, oh God, in 2014. And she said the one thing she always remembered was that there was a client who came in with her cat and she wanted to hear the cat's heart. And so she held up her finger because the woman was talking and telling her all about the cat. And the woman went to her manager. Now, this is right out of vet school, new veterinarian, and wanted her fired right away because she used such a disrespectful motion with her hand of holding up her finger to tell the older woman to be quiet. And the veterinarian was flabbergasted. And it turns out this woman's mother used that all the time, and it triggered such a response in the woman that she wanted the veterinarian fired. Perfect example of what we are not aware of as a life experience of someone else can often escalate into conflict, and you don't even know you're doing it. So addressing conflict is an emotional interaction. I don't care who you are. If you have to go in and have a conversation with someone who either presents as angry, walks in the building as angry, I mean, fear-free practices probably have this less than non-fear-free practices, but I think during COVID, with everyone being out in their car, not knowing what's going on, people running from, the staff running from the building out to the cars, this has got to be stressful and create the perfect storm for conflict. So conflict is an emotional reaction. I just feel like I'm doing too much. I just feel like I'm not doing enough. I just feel like I'm not being respected or appreciated or acknowledged enough. Whether you find resolution or not, the stress of navigating that conflict is immense and palpable. While you're going through it, I know a lot of us will say, it's just, I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore it. It's just, a bad day. I'm going to ignore it. That really weighs heavily on our hearts. And so we carry that with us into our day, today, tomorrow, next week. Do me a favor and jot down just for a minute. And Stacy, if you could read me what some of the responses are. I'd like to know how you address conflicts when they arrive in your office and your life. I'd like to share that in the chat. And Stacy, if you could read a few, I'd love to respond to a few.
Avoidance or ignoring, trying to seek understanding, empathy, starting with one-on-one meetings, stepping away, taking a deep breath, taking a break, confronting conflict head-on, putting them on hold, avoidance. The chat is going wild.
So I love that it's going wild. I love the person who said step away. That is always your best first step, but not to step away forever. You can step away, but you need to step away in a way that has you come back. What I often say to my clients when I'm helping them resolve a conflict is, okay, so you can't avoid it. It will follow you wherever you go, even in your car at night. It'll follow you even if the person's gone. It's going to follow you because you have to address it. It's going to hang heavy on you. It's really going to affect every interaction in your life. So how do we address it so that we can feel supported in addressing a conflict, not feel bullied or disrespected? How do we do that without, avoiding it? Hitting it head on sometimes can create even more conflict because you're not ready yet to hear or listen. So I'm so glad for those open-ended and absolute fearless comments, because it is really important to understand how you address conflict when we're going through this program, so you can implement some of the techniques we're going to use and some of the things we're going to discuss so that you can take a minute to protect yourself. And it's sort of by protecting yourself, you protect others. I often use, and I'll use it a few times tonight, put your mask on first. You have to figure out how you deal with conflict first before you can deal with conflict with others. It's just something you got to do. And I know that in a lot of practices, the staff really wants to have skills to deal with conflict. The veterinary staff might not necessarily be on board. I love veterinarians. I do. I love every single one of them. One of their less strong suits is addressing conflict. I know that that probably isn't what all of you have found, but in my practice, that's what I find. So to have them sit down and recognize, no, they're not wrong. I actually gave a program in Australia for the Green Cross, and most of the veterinarians on the webinar said, "What do you mean we don't have to answer the client right away?" And I said, "Well, are they providing you information you've never heard before?" "Well, yes." I said, "Do you want to hear more?" "Well, yeah." I said, "So ask them for more, take notes, reflect back to them what you've heard, and then say, 'I'd like to get a little more information from my side of the house if I can. Can I call you back tomorrow after work, like 4 or 5 o'clock?'" And they go, "We can say that? We can do that?" I said, "Absolutely, you can." I said, "Because you have a date certain, a time certain when you're going to speak to that person later. You've asked for permission. You've reflected back what they've said. They know you heard them. And so you're going to get back to them. There is no one that I have ever run into, and maybe some of you have, and I apologize, but there's no one I've run into where when you ask them for information, you ask them for more information, you repeat the information they've given you so they know you heard them, and then you ask for time to really address it fully, that they're going to say no. It's just not going to happen. So conflict stressors affect your everyday life. Remember what I said before. You can run, you can hide, you can ignore, you can put the person on hold, but you're going to lose sleep, you're going to worry, you're going to feel helpless, you're going to be irritable. I have to tell you, I'm irritable now all the time because I just replaced my hip and I can't do what I want. So I'm irritable all the time now. And I have to actually hold myself and say, okay, that wasn't really the right way to respond to that because you're angry about something else. Let's address what you're angry about as opposed to, just being generally angry. You're fearful. And you sometimes have the feeling of hopelessness when, conflict is in your life, touching every part of your life. When disagreements are left unaddressed, and I know we'd all like to do that, believe me, because we don't know how to initiate a curious conversation. And I use that word purposefully because you really want to be curious. You don't want to be this, well, tell me about this and tell me about that. You really want to have a tone of voice and an inquiry that is curious and not as if they're under the lights at the FBI. You really want to create some atmosphere that has them understand whoever you're in conflict with, or if you're in conflict, say, I'd really like to tell you more, because you want this curious conversation to help you stop the conflict from taking over your life and their life. Because when they leave, they're either going to go on social media, they're going to call their friend, they're going to call, I don't know, the police, somebody, because they're so angry and you didn't address it. So if you have this curious conversation and you take notes, it'll really be helpful to the next step. So when you don't have a curious conversation, the issue at hand creates its own reality. So you're going to believe what this person meant without asking them because you can read their mind, their perspective, their perception, why they reacted this way. I love Brene Brown. I don't know if any of you listen to Brene Brown, but one of the sentences I've incorporated into my discussion with people in conflict is, so the story I'm telling myself is that you're really upset with the veterinarian because of, and they'll finish that sentence for you. Or you can say, because you didn't know enough. No, that's not true. I'm upset with the veterinarian because of this. You give them the opportunity to provide reality, not have you create the reality you think is running the conflict. It is what we do. We create our own reality. It comes full bore. And at the end of the day, if we ever took the time to stop and have a curious conversation and just find out more, we would actually find out what reality is, not reality as we see it. That reality dictates the manner by which we experience words, body expressions, different hand gestures, different, when people go, the way they breathe. I mean, I do that to my husband all the time. What do you mean? And he's like, I just breathed. But in me, it triggers things. And we have to be really aware of what will trigger us. They become insidious. We don't even recognize them as part of our review pieces, right? And we become unrecognizable to ourselves and to others because we really are wrapped up in the conflict because we've left it unaddressed. Why should you address a problem in your life when it arises? I know I'd rather rip my nails off too, because it makes all the difference in the outcome. As I said when I spoke to the veterinarians in Australia, I said, you really do need to address it, but you need to address it to find information first. You don't have to cure this problem right now. And that's when they said, again, what do you mean I don't have to cure it right now? I said, how can you cure it? You just found out about it. So how can you cure it? It's not about letting it go and not bothering to deal with it. Rather, it's making sure that you address it when it arises, not that you solve it when it arises. And I know I love this sign, address a problem when it arises. Are you kidding? I love the hang, put them on hold. I love the never go back into the room. I love hiding in the back. I love that one too. That's what we do, because I would rather, most times, although this is what I do for a living, never address conflict. When I was a prosecutor, all I did was want to tell you what I knew you were thinking. And that's what we do. So what I'm teaching you here today is how to address it in a way that enables you to understand not only how you're absorbing and receiving information, but how the person who's giving you information means for you to absorb it and receive it. And that is the piece that's often the disconnect. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Most disagreements start and end with communication breakdowns. And those breakdowns start because I'm going to assume I know what you mean, because this has happened so many times before. And so I'm just going to fix it the way I always fix it. I have a veterinarian who I love, who always gives money back to their clients when they raise a fuss. And I said, how do you turn the lights on? I said, if you keep giving people money back just because they raise a fuss, I said, it's Pavlov's dog. They're going to raise a fuss every time they leave so they can get 20% off their bill. I said, why don't you ask them what it is that creates this disharmony or dislike of the services you received, so you can correct it so next time they won't be dissatisfied. She goes, I never thought to ask that question. And I said, correct, because it's addressing a conflict as opposed to avoiding a conflict. When you're angry or upset, I know I do, you feel as if you're drowning. You just can't get out of it. Your face is hot, your skin is hot, your mind is racing, you really are upset. Or you may be better than I am and feel as if at least you're treading water and I can get through today. I just need to get to the car tonight and I'll be okay, which of course is not true. Go back to the slide about how it makes you lose sleep and worry and feel helpless. Choosing to ignore a discussion allows it to fester. And I have to tell you, the people who come to my office who are either veterinarians or pet owners have one thing in common. They didn't feel heard. I was trying to tell the client what I meant and they wouldn't listen. I was trying to tell the veterinarian what I meant and they wouldn't listen. So what was once an ember that would have been able to be addressed with a little shot of water, maybe a glass of water, because you just say, tell me more, is now a huge flame because they felt, and you felt, ignored, disrespected, and not given the opportunity to explain yourself. And when I talk to my clients, I always say it is so much better to get it right than to be right first. I have a colleague who I drive him nuts by saying, you will be righter if you let someone go first and tell you what it is that's bothering them. And he goes, that's not even a word. I said, yeah, it is, because if you hear everything that's underlying someone's conflict and you ask more questions and you don't evaluate those words, you don't evaluate how they feel, you just reflect back what they feel, you are going to be able to douse that fire, because you're going to say, wow, I didn't know this, or wow, that's really important that I knew this. It's the way you receive information, you appreciate and acknowledge that information, that makes the conflict sort of dissipate. Sort of the blazing fire turns into embers again, and then turns into a cold fire. So let's look at the first stages of conflict. I know all of you have been there, and I can tell you I've been there. So you simmer. Then you either disrespect someone or they disrespect you. Then you feel like you can't breathe, but you can't say anything because A, they're a client, or B, it's the vet, or C, it's your boss or whatever. So you can't say anything, you can't breathe. That's the communication breakdown. Um, we are hardwired to be right. So we are unwilling or incapable of taking a step back and asking for more information. It just isn't going to help. Then we go into that animosity mode where we give little digs. I know I'm raising my hand on the other side of the screen, saying, yes, I can be the most condescending person in the entire universe. I can have animosity in my voice, not good, and something I work on every single day because, quite frankly, it doesn't make me feel better. Because I know if I was taking a poll of all of you right now, if you are feeling like you couldn't breathe and disrespected, and you were shooting those, animosity statements off, or you were receiving those statements. I had a friend who went off the rails because someone said, well, my telephone number has been this for years and you don't know what you're talking about. And I said to her, so this is how this person chose to deal with that. You have no idea what her day was like. And so give her the space to understand that, well, that wasn't a really nice way to respond, but I understand it really is frustrating when somebody gets your telephone number wrong, and it's been right everywhere else. Just fold it in. It's usually based on a misunderstanding, and that rage is palpable. And then what happens, and at the end, I hope some of you ask questions. I'd love to hear some of the stories you tell yourself. Well, I did this because of this, or they did this, and that's why I did this. Because those stories we tell ourselves when conflicts arise, oh my God, fuel the fire of escalation of conflict with staff, clients, vets, your family, anybody, the shopkeep, the person at Starbucks when we get our coffee, when they spell our name wrong, whatever, because you're right there on the edge. And you walk out the door, and then, I don't know how many of you do this, I do it all the time, you have remorse. Oh my God, who was that? I had an out-of-body experience. Who was that talked to the Starbucks person that way simply because I had a really bad day walking out the door this morning, or a really bad day at work? You do have that remorse, but we don't have the skill set to really go back and, that I forget which movie it was where they sucked all the words back into your mouth. Take all those words back. You like to, but you can't, because that might be a sign of weakness, and you don't want to be weak. And I'm telling you, I have never made anyone weak. I've made them incredibly strong and incredibly compassionate and empathetic. I love that someone used the word empathy, because that is the way to go forward, is to just be empathetic that someone's having a bad day and you're having a bad day. So let's be empathetic to ourselves and empathetic to others. So how do we shift this paradigm and speak the right words and have a conscious conversation? Because we don't have a conscious conversation. I know that most of the time we are going to have that same conversation over and over again with the same clients because they push our buttons. It takes a lot of skill. It takes a lot of determination to shift that paradigm, to say, I am not going to treat Mrs. Smith in the way that I usually do, because maybe she just has had a bad day, and maybe if I kill her with kindness, no matter what she says, she'll really be surprised and not know how to deal with that. It really is interesting, and I've seen it in a number of practices that I've worked in. There are some clients who come in, everybody says, hi, how are you? Great to see you, love your dogs. And there are the other ones that come in that you go, okay, it's Mrs. Smith, put her in room 3, and nobody talks to her because she's had a run-in, or she just is difficult, or she talks too much. Especially now during COVID, people don't know what to do. The transparency of the process isn't necessarily as good as it can be. So we're all navigating these new roads, and being able to speak the right words, being transparent, and having a conscious conversation, which means a lot more than just speaking, is key. So it may mean not speaking at all. So this is speak the right words. This is a conscious conversation. And here I am telling you, don't speak at all. I created this tool to help you initiate those tough discussions. Now, I'm old, and so in my day and age, they used to have the firemen come in and tell us to stop, drop, and roll, because we used to wear polyester to bed, and if you walk by an open flame, you'd go up in flames. So we learned stop, drop, and roll. I'm really good at creating things that will trigger a memory on my attendees to programs and webinars and things, so that they can put it into practice right away. It's easy to implement, yet it doesn't create that tell. Nobody knows what it means. You can say, well, that's, God forbid something goes up in flames, you just stop, drop, and roll. We're just trying to remind you. But this is to give you the tell on how to handle difficult discussions. I put this in your communication handbook because they can assure the flames of conflict will be doused quickly. I'm telling you, I have so many veterinarians who have this up in their office, and it's such a simple thing to do. So the first thing you do is stop talking and listen. When I do my mediations where I'm helping people address conflicts, I often put duct tape on the table. They have really cute duct tape now with ducks and geese and all sorts of things on the duct tape. I put that on the table and I tell my clients, well, that's because I want to make sure I don't talk too much because this is your process. I also walk into different conflict situations and say, I want that to be out and about, reminding everyone to stop talking and listen. Listen to your client, listen to your staff member, listen to the veterinarian, listen to your manager. Just really listen. Because if you stop talking and listen, you're really going to hear what they're saying. And that's something we overlook, the absolute bonus that we get from listening first. This may seem counterintuitive, but stick with me. Let's look at what maintains and retains dignity. So if you stop talking and listen, you are maintaining these 10 essential elements of dignity. I highly recommend Donna Hicks's book. She did a mediation between people who were in the IRA and British soldiers. And these 10 essential elements of dignity created the ability for these people to have a conversation. So if the IRA and the British Army can talk to each other, I think veterinarians, vet staff, and clients can find a way to have a conversation. But it all has to do with stop talking and listen. So acceptance of identity. You have to approach people as not inferior or superior and assume they're living in integrity. Really, don't cast aspersions on people. You don't know enough about what their day, week, month has been like to assume anything about them. Accept their identity for what it is. Make sure they feel safe psychologically and physically. If you're not being a safe speaker, if you're talking down to people or you're being tough with your words, they're not going to speak the truth about their experience, and you're going to miss why this conflict arose. You need to recognize and validate what they're doing, their thoughtfulness, their contribution, their ideas, what they experienced, because it is so important to recognize people for what they bring to the table. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Assume that they're doing the best they can. Good things happen if you give them the benefit of the doubt. Empower them to act on their own. Give them the opportunity to tell you more. So allow them to be independent, ask those questions, let them tell you more. Make them feel as if they belong, that they're an important part of this practice, whether they're a client, a staff member, a veterinarian, the cleaning people. They're an important part of the practice. Inclusion is key. Acknowledging their viewpoint and validating it, so important. Does not mean you agree. Does not mean you agree. To appreciate somebody else's point of view does not mean you agree. The only thing appreciate has in common with agree are the letters A-R-E. And we are going to find a way out of this conflict if we appreciate a point of view. And don't get stuck in the fact that you need to appreciate my point of view because I just appreciated your point of view. No, that's not there yet. Really, it's not important. You really need to be that person who can hold this safe space for yourself, which is what you're doing, going back to the beginning where I said this is about putting your mask on first. Acknowledging somebody else's point of view really puts you in a better position. Treat everyone fairly, understand what others think and what matters to them. This is called active listening. There is a technique that I teach called looping, where if someone says to you, I waited outside for an hour, no one came to see me, my pet's, really stressed in the car, and now you're going to take them into the vet's office, and I'm crazy and they're crazy. You really want to understand this has been a difficult time. I know we're running a little late today, and I want to really appreciate that that's tough on you and on your pet. And I want to appreciate and thank you for sharing how tough that was for you and your pet, so we know how to really accommodate your pet when we take them inside. That's understanding. That's active listening. You're telling them what it is you're hearing them say and what they're worried about. Take responsibility for your actions, because that's accountability, really key. And everyone should take responsibility for their own actions. So you need to choose to be solution oriented. So it doesn't mean that you have to solve and defend. It means that you have to choose to find solutions that are going to work and seek to hear another person's point of view. I have that word but there because at this point in the program, I do my very funny get your butt out of your head so you can get your head out of your butt. If you say a bunch of things that are really important, um, and then you say, but we did the best we can, you have now negated everything you talked about going forward. If I can take 3 letters out of your vocabulary, it would be but. As I said before, when I said, I'm so glad, Mrs. Smith, you told me how stressed you were in this car, and that we now can really handle Fluffy so much better because of what you've shared with us. If you add, but we're doing the best we can, you've just negated that. Just leave it at, and now we can really handle Fluffy in a way that will be respectful of where she is right now. It is such a powerful word that deflates all the good words you use. It really puts you at a crossroads that creates more conflict. If you are solution oriented, remember there's more than one solution. There's not just your way or the highway. I know in a lot of practices that is the case, but it really isn't just your way or the highway. Be open to listening regardless of the absurdity. Some of the best solutions that have ever occurred have come from funny brainstorming where people put, words or ideas on pieces of paper and people said, wow, that really sounds smart. Let's do it. And no one would have done it unless it was on a piece of paper in the middle of the room and no one would have known where it came from. Keep your ears open and your mouth shut. It will work to helping you find a solution. This is a thinking lesson that I'd like you all to take. And I know some of you are raising your hand. Stacy, do you want any questions for me to answer now, or do you want to wait till the end?
The chat has been going crazy throughout this whole presentation. Everyone is loving everything, but we will save some questions for the end, but please feel free to keep going.
Perfect. Okay. So I want each of you to take this thinking lesson, and let's see how good a listener you are. So think about the last time you listened to someone you disagreed with. Did you really hear what they were saying? And what was your reply? So put it in the chat so Stacy can share it. But what were they really saying? Did you hear it? Or did you hear what you thought they were saying, or what you had built up in your mind they were saying? And did you reply to what you thought they were saying or to what they were actually saying? And did you ever take a minute to reflect back to see if you heard what they said correctly? What are they saying, Stace?
All right, responses are pouring in. My husband always says we can leave off the last sentence. It's too much to say sometimes. Less is often better, and more doesn't make it better.
Yep. Yep.
The last time I listened to someone and disagreed was yesterday. I replied to what I thought they were saying. I heard them and repeated it back to them. There's
Good
that
for
active
you.
listening there. Not truly listening, but really thinking about how I wanted to respond.
Yeah, that is a human nature. So bravo for being brave and saying that, because that is human nature. I am thinking about what I'm going to tell you because I know what I think you need to hear. Hello, not really, but okay, that's why we're here tonight. Reflection. Do you think your ability to listen is diminished when you're agitated? The answer to that, of course, is absolutely yes. We cannot hear with both our ears when our brain is going 90 miles an hour, when we feel disrespected, when we feel angry, when we feel any sort of negative input. We really can't hear fully. It's amazing. Somebody said before, I breathe. You really do have to stop and breathe. It creates that space for you to truly listen, so you can diminish that agitation and actually really hear and ask, tell me more, or can you tell me a little more what you meant when you said this, because I'm confused. because this will give you the opportunity to clarify in your own mind what you're hearing and to help the person clarify in their own mind what they want you to hear. Do you react to what you're observing or hearing in the moment? This goes back to past experiences. That goes back to that client who's always a pain in the hiney. That goes back to that staff member who's always doing less than they're supposed to do or never where they're supposed to be. You're really responding to history as opposed to what's happening in the moment. And we really have to be aware of our doing that and make a concerted effort and a conscious effort to be in the moment, as opposed to remembering that last Monday you weren't where you were supposed to be either. You really want to be in this moment, not last moment. Because what happens is, if you don't take that moment and breathe, if you aren't present and grounded in this moment, you're going to go down the rabbit hole 90 miles an hour. Believe me, that's why I do what I do, because that rabbit hole is quick to grab you. You know, Alice has nothing on the rabbit holes of conflict. Or worse, you circle the wagons and ignore it, it'll go away. And often in veterinary practices, if something happens to a pet, you're given legal advice to do that. And I want to shake people and say, really, that is the worst thing to do, because the client usually wants to just have a conversation. And if I can help veterinarians and their staff listen without responding and being mindful of how that person felt and appreciating and looping what they said, and then taking a minute to find out more on their own and come back. If you talk to them on a Monday, come back on a Wednesday. If you talk to them on a Wednesday, come back on a Thursday or Friday. What you have to do is come back, which of course the person who wants to go in the back and hide isn't going to do. But you really need to give you and them time to decompress, time to be mindful of what's going through your body and through your mind, and then address it. So there's another book I highly recommend. It's called High Conflict, and it's by Amanda Ripley. Fabulous book. She talks about high conflict and good conflict. So when animals are involved, I have to tell you, everything is high conflict. There is no ability to have good conflict yet. I'm working on it. That's my mission with pets. And that would mean that you are trying to find a way out as opposed to just escalate the conflict. Curiosity is contagious. That's part of good conflict. It chips underneath the familiar everyday grievances to find out what's really important. Does the fight seem clear? And most people feel it's over money or over lack of information, or maybe it is the need to be right. I just need to be right. You didn't do this, and you need to tell me that I'm right and you're wrong. Never a good way to solve anything. The more interesting conflicts lie beneath the articulated fight. Usually the articulated fight has nothing to do with what is fueling the fight. To get beyond conflict, you have to go through it. There is absolutely no other way to get past conflict. And if you think by refunding money or by writing a letter or by doing something, that client may go on to another veterinarian, or they may come back. What you want to do is you want to have closure for you. You want to have closure. At the beginning, I said, decide whether or not you're going to keep your client, but send them away happy. That is key, because that makes you happy. And I'm taking care of you as well as your client. So high conflict and good conflict talk about the conflict trap. In high conflict, conflict is the destination. I want to be there. I want to stay there. I have fleeting moments of satisfaction. I mean, we all have, right? I got that zinger in on that girl and she didn't know what hit her. Boy, was that timing perfect. I usually don't have that great timing, but I did today, and I am so proud of myself. And then you get in the car, you drive away and you go, oh my God, that was such a terrible thing to say. Why did I do that? So the metaphor that Amanda Ripley uses in her book, High Conflict, is the La Brea tar pits. And I don't know if any of you or all of you know about the La Brea tar pits, but these are these live tar pits where animals would go in and not sink to the bottom, but be stuck there. And then other animals would come thinking an easy meal, and then they get stuck in. So she relates high conflict to the La Brea tar pits. Once you get in, you can't get out. You're like in it forever unless somebody takes a conscious step toward good conflict. Now, good conflict is where you ask questions, you're curious, and it leads to somewhere, and there's movement. It generates wonder. What is going on here? I want to know. I truly want to know. I'm not just doing this to get you out of my office, but I truly want to know. I want to help you and I get over this conflict. So let's explore some of the benefits of listening first. I tell you, it is the simplest thing to do. Stop talking and listen, and you will get to the end and out of conflict so much quicker. It takes the need to defend out of the discussion. And we all are reactive and defensive. So if we can take those two emotions out of our conversation with someone who we're in conflict with, we're 75% out of conflict. I'm telling you. It gives you time to confirm and evaluate the information you're receiving. Remember, I said, reflect and repeat. It's called looping. So when I hear you tell me that you had to wait outside for a really long time, your dog is really stressed, this is a stressful time for you, this is a stressful time for your dog, and you want to really leave because this wasn't transparently shared with you before you got here. I can absolutely understand that. And I want to tell you, I'm so glad you let us know so I can let the staff know that we have to be a little more transparent with our clients and make sure. Now, you may have sent them 3 emails that said, this is what it's like when you're outside. This is what we do. However, most people, I included, don't read those emails. And so you have to really check in at the beginning to see if they've ever read those emails so they know what to expect. Provide everyone with an opportunity to appreciate what was heard and how it was heard. So I just heard you say this. This is the story I'm telling myself. And then they can either say, yep, that's exactly how I feel, or, oh my God, no, that's not what I heard. My husband is the king of that. I love when Stacy said one of the responses was, my husband said the last sentence you can leave off. My husband always tells me that every sentence that I think he's giving me is not at all what he meant to give me. And so it's not his fault. It's my interpretation and perspective of what he's saying. And let me tell you, we're married 40 years. We're still here. However, he's absolutely right. I have this perception of what he means when he says something. And although I'm very good at this in my practice, the shoemaker's shoes are not as good as the shoes he sells to other people because, you're emotional. These are people you live with every day. When you work with them every day. So it's really important to know what you're experiencing so that you can help and appreciate how you've heard the information shared with you. So the next one is drop. Drop the need to be right. Oh my God, nobody wants to do this. It's the most difficult action for a perfectionist. I know because I am one. Having a strong need to be right now will not shift the momentum. It won't. As I talked about before, you really don't want to use but, and you don't need to be right now. You will be righter if you listen first. If you need to be right, you're likely solution oriented and you need to think about free. So focus on what's working, not what's broken. Bring that positive energy into the conversation. Talk about what did work. Ask them, so tell me what might have worked today that worked for you. And they might say nothing. Okay, well, I appreciate you letting me know that. Respect the other person's opinion is key. Embrace an alternate vision solution positively. It doesn't mean if somebody has another solution or vision, that doesn't mean that you throw it out the door because it's not what you've done all the time. It might actually work. And elevate your observations. Choose to receive information positively from your family, your client. Look at the glass as half full and acknowledge what is working in the relationship as opposed to what isn't. And the last piece, so we had stop talking and listen, drop the need to be right, and now roll. Let the criticism roll off your back. That old sticks and stones will break my bones. Enable venting. Oh my God. It is just the most important thing, and it is not to be taken on by you. If someone's being disrespectful, using disrespectful language, that's not what I mean. However, if someone is venting, say, I understand this is a really tough time. COVID has made everybody a little crazy. What happens is their prefrontal cortex and amygdala have taken over, or not taken over. The amygdala is taken over, not the prefrontal cortex. And you have to give them time to let the amygdala do its dance until the prefrontal cortex takes over. So choose how you will respond, and maybe not responding or appreciating what they're saying and acknowledging it without engaging will be key. Appreciate does not mean agreement. We talked about that. I want to teach all of you that to enable venting builds a bridge, and it'll help you maintain equilibrium. Some people are disrespectful, and I'm sure there'll be many questions about what do we do when someone is really disrespectful and uses terrible language. Appreciate that they are really frustrated and leave it at that. Say, I know this is really frustrating, and it really makes us say and do things that we might not necessarily say and do in another environment because COVID has really made everyone on edge. And that, I have found in the past year, has taken a lot of the air out of the destructive disagreement conversation. I also highly advocate apologizing. Listen, I am so sorry you were out there so long. We have just had a lot of people come in, and there's no excuse, and I want to apologize. You want to self-empower. You want to advocate for everybody's best interests. And that's why listening first enables this. You're listening for yourself so you really understand what's being said. You're listening to yourself to hear how you're hearing things, and check with yourself whether or not you're going off the deep end or whether or not you're really listening to the words being used. Preempt the problem by asking curious questions early and often. And remember, others' opinions or observations of you or your practice do not define you. It's their observation. They can own it. It's okay. You know, if I'm something, 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 that's how they feel right then. And I'm not going to deny them their ability to feel that way about me. That's fine. But it's not my definition of me. And I think that's the hardest piece of self-empowerment I teach people. If they're being disrespectful to me, why can't I be disrespectful back to them? Because it really doesn't elevate you to the level you want to be elevated. Believe it or not, when it comes to speaking the right words, if silence is golden, active listening is platinum. If you choose to listen first, you will uncover important issues and emotions that are happening in that person. It'll allow the heat to diminish because you're not adding verbal fuel. Your hearing will be enhanced because you're not trying to think of that answer. Like one of the respondents said, I'm trying to think of how I'm going to answer them. You're not doing that. You're just listening to them. You're not trying to think of the answer you're going to give them. And P.S., no one can fight alone. It never happens. So if you listen and reflect back, nobody can fight alone. It is a very difficult thing to do. However, you really can listen more and speak less. So what did we learn here today? Talking and listening, speak the right words or no words at all, assuming everyone thinks like you, perspective, perception, bias, experience. That's what we need to be aware of. Listen more, talk less, and please, God, don't assume everyone thinks like you. Your perspective, perception, and bias are different, and so is theirs. So leave them at the door. Drop the need to be right because you are. Nobody can make you wrong. Approach issues with a closed mind because you want to learn more. No, you want to approach issues with an open mind. You want to learn more. Don't be disrespectful and condescending. It might feel good in the moment, but not long term. And remember the high conflict versus good conflict. One is stagnant, you're just going to stay in the fight, and the good conflict is moving toward a resolution. And finally, understand the motions of the day rules. Whatever you brought in with you from the minute you left the house or got out of bed, that's what you're bringing in with you. And you may or may not have control of it. Sometimes I don't. Let statements roll off your back, because you know what? It's not as if you're a doormat and everybody's going to be able to say what they want or do what they want to you. No, you are not going to rise to the bait because you have a handle on how you want to feel today. And that's what I strive to have people do. I want them to feel good about themselves and not take on the negativity that might come their way because other people are having a bad day. Actively applying these solution tools will allow you to remove stressful activities and demands from your life. If you cannot, then learn to joyfully deal with them. Either way, no more complaining. You're in charge of what you allow in your life and how you cope with it. Put this up. I love this comment because it really is about what I teach people to do to help themselves deal with this kind of conflict. And the greatest skill of speaking the right words, being mindful, being conscious of the conversation. So, any questions? I think I'm 5 minutes good.
That was so fantastic, Deborah. Thank you so much. I do have to tell you, the amygdala came up slightly before your presentation in the chat. One of our attendees said in a parenting class, they learned about lizard brain versus wizard brain.
Yep.
When you're triggered, you function in your amygdala and not in your prefrontal cortex.
And if you can take a minute to let the amygdala run its course and recognize it's the amygdala, so I want to go and choke that person for saying that. If you can recognize that as the lizard brain and say, okay, I'm just going to wait until my prefrontal cortex kicks in, because it'll kick in the car and tell me, why did you do that? I'm going to give it time to kick in now.
Oh, all right. We have a ton of great questions here. Some of them came in from the chat box, so I'm going to try to do those first just to make sure that I don't lose them. But let's see here. So when we're talking about people that vent, what about people who just vent all the time? What is the best approach to dealing with that constant negativity?
It's interesting. If people are venting, there's something going on with them. And, the glass is always half empty. People are always mean to them. They're always the brunt of everything. What I usually do is I either say to the people who have to live with them, appreciate that this is a really tough day for you. And it's been a tough week. And what can you think of that will make the day a little bit better for you? Because this is totally about their mindset. And you can't shift their mindset, but you don't want to take on their negativity. So you want to really address them with, this has been a rough week for you. I've absolutely observed you being just disappointed over and over and over again. What is it that you can do tonight, tomorrow, to really decompress and relax and find some good? Just, offer them. We can't fix people, Stacy. So you can't go, well, what can I do to help you? There's nothing you can do. If somebody wants to be a negative Nelly for their entire life, I know a few, you can't change them. However, you can help them by saying, one thing could you do right now that would make you happy? Well, I would quit. Well, okay, so is that an option that you want to take advantage of? Well, no. Okay, so what is an option you can take advantage of right now that will make you feel better? Well, I'd like to go get a Starbucks iced coffee. Great. So when we have a break, let's go get a Starbucks iced coffee. And then we reflect back to, I really felt good about that Starbucks iced coffee. What you can do is you can shift their paradigm in small ways, but if they're consistently negative and just want to look at every glass as half empty, then it might take a little bit more assistance for them to recognize they're not serving themselves. You can't serve them, but they need to serve themselves, and maybe helping them, maybe read, Amanda's book or Donna's book, so that they can learn to serve themselves and be better to themselves.
What a great response. Next question that we have here. Super excited to learn about all of these tools, but how do we use and implement these when we're experiencing compassion fatigue and burnout? I'm sure that this directly affects how reactive we are and how much extra energy we have to do these.
Great question. And absolutely. Well, the good news is that it doesn't take really any energy to listen. It takes a lot of energy to think and speak. It doesn't take really any energy to listen. If you listen, you are simply listening for what someone's saying so that you can reflect back to them. So you're letting them do all the work. So Mrs. Smith, I heard you say that, it was a long wait and that, this was a tough day. And I want to tell you that this is something that we're hearing very often. And I appreciate you sharing that with us, period. You are not going to cure them. You are exhausted. And so being able to listen without having to solve the issues of the world. And if somebody asks you to solve the issues of the world, really advocate for yourself and say, right now, I'm going to listen to what Mrs. Smith has to say, or I'm listening to what you have to say as my staff member or my vet. And I'm going to do that. And I am going to reflect back what I'm hearing to make sure I hear you, and then we're going to proceed forward. You don't have to solve the ills of the office or of another client. That's not your job. It's their job. They have to solve their own ills. But what you can do is you can let them feel heard, which is that good conflict piece where they feel as if someone heard them, and then they might be able to then pivot to solving their own conflict on their own. Did that help? Did that answer that question? I think it did, because I do recognize that compassion fatigue and fatigue period is rampant now because of, having to be 3 different places at every day, at every time. And how do we make this really being self-protective and saying, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to share what I've heard you say. And I really do appreciate you sharing that with me. And that's it. That's all I can give you today. That's what I would say. So, and it's not condescending or clippish. That's all that we can do today. And we're so grateful that you give us the opportunity to care for Fluffy.
That's a great response. The next question here is, can these tools be used via email when addressing an issue, or is email not a good idea in these situations?
I think email, social media, and Twitter are and texts are the death knell of any conversation. And I apologize, everyone. Yes, indeed, they work really well when you want to say something and not have to listen. So you're breaking the cardinal rule of stop talking and listen. Uh, they work really well in email if you say, Mrs. Smith, thank you for telling me A, B, and C today in the office, because you're reflecting back what she said. Can we set up a time to talk about A, B, and C tomorrow or Wednesday, whatever day of the week it is, because I really want to hear more. I don't ever think addressing someone's disagreement in an email works to the veterinarian's advantage. And I always tell my clients who are the pet owners, it doesn't work to their advantage, because the emotion and the timbre of your voice and what you really mean is never felt in an email, a text, or any posting on Facebook. What you want to do is you want to have a conversation. And I know that's tough. Preferably, a Zoom call, because it's really interesting in my practice. I thought everybody would hang up when somebody got mean or said something they didn't like, but they don't, because nobody wants to be that person who hangs up. You really do get to have more of a in-person, and it's safe, right? An in-person conversation on Zoom than you do with an email. I don't think emails are out 100%, but I wouldn't do anything more than reflect back what they told you. So this is what I heard you say. I'd love to continue this conversation. Can we do it on Wednesday at 3? That's what I'd use the email for. You can't solve on an email, I'm telling you.
I think that's so important and something that we're getting away from, because texting and email are just so the norm. And kind of, adding on to that point of, sometimes when you do need that space or time, what's the best way to phrase to an owner that you want to call them back after you're able to consider all the information they gave you? You don't want to add to their frustration by making them wait, because they often want an answer right in the moment.
Right. So the best way to do that is to say, Mrs. Smith, I want to reflect back to you what I've heard. And hopefully you've taken notes. And you say, so you told me that you waited 45 minutes out in the parking lot, and that the dog was really fretful when it left and even more fretful when it got back. And you want to know more about what happened inside, because clearly something happened inside, because the dog was incredibly fretful. And you're worried, and you'd like to talk to the vet, because this isn't the usual way that Fluffy comes out of the vet. And I want to make sure that I got everything you told me today. And she'll either say, yes, you did, or no, you missed this and this, and you'll add that. And then you'll reflect that back. So you're adding that the girl who came out was short with you, and that she dropped the leash, whatever she adds, right? And they say, yeah, that's it. I am so grateful you let us know about all this information. Would it be okay? I would like to check with my staff, and I'd like to do a little more investigation. And can we speak? What you need to do, I swear to God, it's the lifesaver of life, and nobody does it. At 3:00 tomorrow afternoon, I have a half hour. And if that won't work, I have a half hour at noontime on Friday, whatever. I'd like to block that time off for us to talk about this that day. Would that be okay? If you reflect back what someone has told you is the issue they want answered right away, and you ask them to give you time to think about your response, and also to find out more information from your staff and from the incident, I don't think there's anyone who'll say, no, I want an answer right now. And if they do, if they're that kind of person, they say, no, I want an answer right now. I appreciate that you want an answer right now. And, if I were you, I'd want an answer right now too. I would so appreciate your giving me the opportunity to do just a little more investigation, so that I can give you the best answer on Wednesday at 3 or Friday at 12. Appreciate, acknowledge, appreciate, acknowledge. Doesn't mean you agree. It just means that you understand that they want an answer right here, right now. Don't walk out of the room. and say, I get it. And if I were you, I'd want an answer right now too. However, I really feel we're doing both of each other a disservice by not finding out all the information so we can make a decision on all the information.
And so many responses are coming in saying all of these answers are helping so much that we tend to be fixers by nature. So it's so nice to hear that we don't always have to be, which is such a great sentiment from our audience tonight. We do have a couple more minutes. So we'll go ahead and go through maybe 2 or 3 more questions that we have here. So 2 questions came in on pretty much the same topic. What do you think of the statement, "I'm sorry you feel that way"? Is that productive or no?
Nope. Nope. You are lighting that, you are throwing that gasoline on that fire. That is like butt. Take that out of your vocabulary as well. I'm sorry you feel that way because you're stupid. No, I mean, but that's what they're thinking in their head is, the only reason you're thinking that way is because you're stupid. So no, never say that. Say, I appreciate that you feel that way. And
That
I'm
is
so
a
glad
great
you
way
let
to
me
phrase
know.
that.
I'm sorry you feel that way is such a fuel on the fire kind of thing. And we do it all the time because these are our knee-jerk things. Believe me, I was a litigator for 30 years and I tried to, speak the right words for the past 10 and finally I think have a good handle on how to shift it so that I'm not pouring fire, except with my husband, but then that's a whole nother story.
All right, the next question here. Could you please repeat what the final EE in free stands for?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll actually go back to the slide so everybody can get that. Whoops, here we go. Embrace an alternate vision solution positively. So when someone says to you, but I want it this way, don't say there's no way I'm going to do that. Say, that's an interesting perspective. And I'd like to think about that overnight. That gives you the opportunity not to answer them right away, right? Because you want to think about it overnight. Everyone's vision can be acknowledged. It doesn't mean you agree. Create a way to collect positive data. Now, this is the best. I love free because of the fact that, you're free of having to make a decision right now. You're free of having to think your decision is the only one that's the right decision. So embrace alternative visions because you might find, as I said, there's, they throw ideas in the middle of a pot and everybody pulls it out and somebody has this funny thing about having a coffee card for people who write the best reviews on social media. And who would have thought of that? That's a great idea, but it's an alternate vision. Nobody would have ever thought of that. Well, those are the kind of things that you want to embrace. If a client has an alternate vision that you're like, how could you ever see that way? It's okay. They see it that way. Don't tell them they're wrong. They're not. You're not wrong and they're not wrong. And finally, elevate your observations. So what that means is you really want to choose how you receive information. It goes back to that client who walks in and everybody goes, oh my God, Mrs. Smith is here. Put her in room 3. I'm not going in. Or Mrs. Jones is here. And oh my God, don't you love Mrs. Jones? She has such great dogs. And, let's leave her out here so we can all pet the dog and blah, blah, blah. So elevate your observations of everyone. Don't let somebody slip into that, Mrs. Smith role where they go in room 3 and nobody talks to them because they're usually, dark or, they have that cloud over their head, whatever. Try to be that person who elevates their life that day as well.
Thank you for that recap there. And then the last question I think we're going to take tonight, just being respectful of everybody's time, but I do want to let everyone know that this presentation is being recorded and will be available usually within about 7 to 10 days on the Fear Free Pets site. So letting all of you know, because we got that question quite a bit. But the last question we're going to take here is,
sorry guys,
do these rules directly apply when dealing with internal conflicts between staff and employees, or is it slightly adjusted for those circumstances?
They are ubiquitous, I think is the right word. They apply to everyone to the same amount because what it is it's just how you respond. So it has nothing to do with whether you're in your office talking to a staff member or a client or a veterinarian. It's how you are receiving information. So you're dealing with yourself. So you really want to treat yourself with as much kindness as you can in the midst of a conflict, and give yourself the opportunity to allow yourself to understand how you're reacting, what's coming up for you, and giving yourself time to respond in a way that's going to serve you. So if you missed that part of this, I hope you guys didn't. This is about helping you address conflict, not helping you address conflict that's other people's problems. It's helping you address conflict. So the stuff that comes up for you, the stuff that bothers you, the stuff you're subjected to by other people, it all comes to you and how you handle it. Again, the last thing I'll leave with you guys is put your mask on first. You have to understand how you react to conflict and how you deal with conflict before you can actually address conflict in a productive way.
What a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Deborah, for that incredibly thorough presentation and so timely. I know it's something that we can all really use right now. So thank you so much again. And thank you to our sponsors for this evening, Vetiquinol. And thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. The chat is still flooding in with thank yous and so much appreciation for tonight. So
Well, thank everyone for being here. I appreciate it because really helping you with the burnout and helping you with the compassion fatigue is what that's my mission in life. So I'm so glad to be here, and thank Fear Free and Vetiquil for putting this on. You're right, Stacy. It is so timely and necessary. And anybody who needs to chat with me, my contact information, feel free.
oh, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening and a great rest of your week. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.